For 80 long years, a single question has echoed through hangars, museums, and online forums, sparking endless arguments among aviation fans. Which propeller-driven fighter was the undisputed king of speed in World War II? Today, we settle that debate. We're not talking about myths or legends. We're digging into the hard data, documented maximum speeds in level flight, pulled directly from official test results, declassified wartime reports, and verified performance trials. These are the 8 fastest prop-driven fighters that actually flew and fought during the Second World War. You won't find any experimental prototypes that never left the ground here. No paper designs that existed only in an engineer's dream. Every single aircraft on this list rolled off a production line, and the vast majority faced the terrifying reality of enemy fire in actual combat. Their incredible speeds weren't magic. They were born from cutting-edge engineering, desperate life-or-death innovation, and the relentless, all-consuming push to dominate the skies in humanity's most devastating conflict. So buckle up. We're about to count down from number 8 to the absolute fastest propeller fighter that ruled the skies in 1945. Kicking off our list at number 8 is a late-war German terror, the Focke-Wulf FW-190 D9. This formidable machine could slice through the air at a blistering 426 miles per hour. Known to its pilots as the Dora, or more descriptively, the Long Nose, this fighter was a radical evolution of the FW-190 series that had been giving Allied pilots nightmares since 1941. Those earlier models, with their big, burly BMW radial engines, were legendary low-altitude brawlers, absolute thugs in a dogfight below 20,000 feet. But the war was changing. Allied bombers were pushing higher and higher, escorted by new fighters that could outperform the original FW-190 in the thin, cold air of the upper atmosphere. Germany needed an answer, and the D9 was it. The engineers at Focke-Wulf performed a heart transplant. They ripped out the air-cooled radial engine and shoehorned in a liquid-cooled inline Junkers Jumo 213A. This new engine was longer and sleeker, forcing them to extend the fuselage forward, creating that distinctive, almost elegant long nose that gave the aircraft its nickname and its menacing profile. This wasn't just a cosmetic change. It transformed the FW-190's entire personality. It went from being a street fighter to a high-altitude assassin. It could now climb to meet Allied bomber streams head-on and had the performance to tangle with the latest American P-51 Mustangs and British Spitfires on their own terms. Production started in August 1944, a point in the war when the tide had decisively turned against Germany. Yet over 700 of these potent fighters were built before the final collapse. Luftwaffe pilots who flew the Dora praised its newfound high-altitude legs, but they were thrilled to find it still possessed the phenomenal roll rate and rock-solid construction that had made the FW-190 family a legend. In the desperate, chaotic final months of the war, the Dora 9 fought with incredible ferocity against overwhelming odds, a final, defiant technological scream in the defense of a dying Reich. Flying into the number 7 spot is Britain's answer to low-altitude warfare, the magnificent Hawker Tempest V, capable of a thunderous 435 miles per hour. The Tempest was born from the DNA of its predecessor, the Hawker Typhoon. The Typhoon was a beast, powerful and rugged, but it had its flaws, particularly at higher altitudes. The Royal Air Force wanted something better, something faster. Hawker's design genius, Sidney Combe, went back to the drawing board. He gave the new aircraft a revolutionary thin laminar flow wing and bolted on an even more powerful version of the monstrous 24-cylinder Napier Sabre engine. The result was the Tempest, and it was an absolute game-changer. Entering service in April of 1944, the Tempest arrived just in the nick of time to face one of the war's strangest and most terrifying new weapons, the V-1 flying bomb. These pilotless cruise missiles were screaming towards London at over 400 miles per hour, too fast for most conventional fighters to intercept at low altitude. But not for the Tempest. Its exceptional speed down on the deck made it the single most successful V-1 interceptor of the war. Tempest squadrons became the dedicated doodlebug hunters, accounting for over 800 of these terrifying weapons. Their pilots developed daring tactics. They discovered they could catch the V-1s in level flight, pull alongside, and then use the airflow over their own wingtip to gently flip the V-1 onto its side, toppling its primitive gyroscope and sending it spiraling harmlessly into the French countryside. But the Tempest wasn't just a defensive weapon. It proved to be an utterly lethal air-to-air combatant. Its deadly combination of raw speed, devastating firepower from 4 20mm cannons, and surprisingly nimble handling made it a feared opponent for any German fighter that dared to face it. In the final year of the war, as the Allies pushed across Europe, Tempest squadrons racked up staggering kill ratios against Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs. Many of its pilots, men who had flown Spitfires and Hurricanes, swore it was the finest piston-engine fighter Britain ever produced. At number 6, we have a name that needs no introduction, but a version that represented the absolute zenith of its design, the legendary Supermarine Spitfire Mark 14. Clocking in at an incredible 446 miles per hour, this was not your grandfather's Spitfire. The Spitfire that saved Britain in the darkest days of 1940 was an icon, a symbol of defiance. But the Mk-14 was a fundamentally different, far more ferocious machine. It was a Spitfire that had been hitting the gym hard. The secret to its power lay under the hood. The engineers at Rolls-Royce had developed a new engine, the Griffon-65. Where the original Merlin engines produced around 1,000 horsepower, the Griffon was a behemoth, a V12 monster that churned out over 2,000 horsepower. It was like swapping the engine from a family sedan into a Formula One race car. This colossal surge in power meant the entire airframe had to be re-engineered. The fuselage was strengthened and the tail surfaces were dramatically enlarged just to handle the immense torque from the new engine and its 5-bladed propeller. Without these changes, the plane would have tried to twist itself into a corkscrew on takeoff. The result was a Spitfire that could climb like a homesick angel. It could claw its way into the stratosphere, fighting effectively at altitudes where earlier versions struggled for breath. First flown in January 1943, the Mk-14 began reaching frontline squadrons in early 1944. It was an immediate success. It proved more than a match for the latest German fighters and was particularly brilliant at intercepting high-altitude reconnaissance planes. More importantly, it was one of the few Allied propeller fighters that could successfully catch and destroy the new German jets, like the Me-262. The Griffon's raw power gave the Spitfire an acceleration that left German pilots, accustomed to outrunning older Merlin-powered variants, utterly shocked and helpless. Over 900 of these ultimate Spitfires were built, serving with honor and distinction right up to the end of the war. Alright, before we break into the top 5 fastest fighters of the war, I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? And more importantly, who's your pick for the #1 spot? Is it an American icon, a German wonder weapon, or a British legend? Drop your prediction in the comments below, and let me know if any of these rankings have surprised you so far. And hey, if you're enjoying this deep dive into the golden age of aviation, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Now, let's get back to it. Cracking our top 5 is an American beast of pure performance, the Grumman FFF Bearcat, capable of a staggering 455 miles per hour. The Bearcat was the result of a beautifully simple design philosophy. In the brutal carrier war of the Pacific, the U.S. Navy had learned the value of smaller escort carriers, or jeep carriers. Grumman's engineers were given a challenge. Take the most powerful engine we have, the massive 2,100 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, and build the absolute smallest, lightest, meanest fighter you can possibly wrap around it. The result was extraordinary. The Bearcat was a hot rod in the truest sense of the word. It was all engine. The performance figures were mind-bending. The Bearcat could claw its way to 10,000 feet in just 94 seconds. To put that in perspective, that's a climb rate that would leave many modern light aircraft in the dust. Its roll rate was phenomenal, snapping from one bank to another in the blink of an eye. And despite its compact size, it packed a heavyweight punch, armed with either 4 20mm cannons or 6.50 caliber machine guns. But the Bearcat story is one of unfortunate timing. It was the right plane at the wrong time. It officially entered service in February of 1945, far too late to see any significant combat in World War II. When Japan surrendered in August, only 24 Bearcats had reached operational squadrons in the Pacific. But its performance left an indelible mark on everyone who flew it. Test pilots unanimously called it one of the finest handling fighters of the entire propeller era. In the post-war years, it found its fame as the chosen mount of the elite Blue Angels demonstration team and went on to set multiple time-to-climb records, some of which stood for decades.
It was a fighter designed for a war that ended just before it could prove its mettle. At number 4, we have a German ghost of the high skies, an aircraft designed to hunt in the lethal emptiness above 30,000 feet, the Focke-Wulf Ta-152H. This specialized interceptor could reach an astonishing 469 miles per hour. By 1944, American and British bombers were flying higher and in greater numbers than ever before. For most standard German fighters, operating at these altitudes was a struggle. The air was too thin, engines gasped for oxygen, and performance dropped off dramatically. The Ta-152H was Kurt Tank's answer to this high-altitude threat. It looked almost alien compared to its FW-190 cousins. It featured incredibly long, graceful wings that spanned nearly 48 feet, giving it the appearance of a powered glider. These wings were designed to provide lift in the thin air of the stratosphere. It also had a pressurized cockpit to keep its pilot conscious and a powerful Jumo 213E engine fitted with a 2-stage, 3-speed supercharger, a complex piece of machinery designed to force-feed the engine air at extreme altitudes. This combination gave it an otherworldly performance envelope. Above 40,000 feet, an altitude where most Allied fighters were sluggish and unresponsive, the Ta-152H came alive. At these heights, it could outclimb, outrun, and outmaneuver virtually any opponent it faced. But, like so many of Germany's advanced late-war designs, the aircraft arrived far too late to make a difference. Production began in November 1944, and perhaps only 150 were ever completed before the war's end. Very few reached operational units, and even fewer saw actual combat. Those that did, however, earned immediate and profound respect from the Allied pilots who encountered them. In one famous incident on April 14, 1945, Oberfeldwebel Willy Reschke, flying a Ta-152H, engaged 4 P-51 Mustangs at high altitude. He shot down 2 and damaged a third before making his escape, a stunning testament to the aircraft's capabilities. The Ta-152H was a symbol of Germany's technological brilliance and its strategic desperation. It was an outstanding design that arrived when Germany lacked the fuel, the pilots, and the industrial infrastructure to use it effectively. What might have been a game-changer in 1943 was a tragic footnote in 1945. Roaring into our number 3 spot is the ultimate expression of American brute force, the Republic P-47M Thunderbolt. This specialized variant of the famous Jug could hit a top speed of 472 miles per hour. The P-47M was a hot rod, a purpose-built dragster designed for one specific mission, to hunt down and destroy Germany's fastest high-altitude fighters and the new jet aircraft that had begun to appear over Europe in late 1944. Engineers at Republic took the already fast Thunderbolt and turned everything up to 11. They fitted it with a specially modified Pratt & Whitney R2800-57C, featuring an improved turbocharger system that boosted its performance at high altitude. They also added a water injection system, which acted like a shot of adrenaline for the engine, providing a massive surge of emergency power for short bursts. To top it all off, they put the airframe on a diet, making various modifications to save weight. These changes transformed the famously tough but heavy Thunderbolt into a thoroughbred high-altitude interceptor. It could now challenge German jets and reach speeds that absolutely shocked pilots who were used to flying the earlier, slower P-47 variants. This was a highly specialized machine. Only 130 P-47M were ever built, and they were all delivered to a single unit, the legendary 56th Fighter Group, who had specifically requested a
faster Thunderbolt to counter the growing German jet threat. In practice, the P-47M proved to be a bit temperamental. Its high-performance engine was like a finely tuned racing engine. It required meticulous, constant maintenance. Early models suffered from a rash of severe engine failures that grounded the entire fleet for weeks. But once these teething problems were ironed out, the P-47M was devastating. It combined the Thunderbolt's legendary toughness and its crushing firepower of 8.50 caliber machine guns with a top speed that could match or exceed almost any piston engine fighter the Luftwaffe could put in the air. The 56th Fighter Group flew their hot-rodded jugs until the very end of the war, racking up kills against both conventional fighters and the new jets, proving that the old warhorse still had a lethal kick. Our runner-up at number 2 is one of the most bizarre, most innovative, and most terrifying-looking aircraft of the entire war, Germany's Dornier Do 335, Pile, or Arrow. This aviation marvel could achieve an incredible 474 miles per hour. This was an aircraft unlike any other that flew in World War II. It featured a revolutionary push-pull configuration. There was a standard Daimler-Benz DB603 engine mounted in the nose, pulling the aircraft through the air with a conventional propeller. But then, mounted behind the cockpit, was a second, identical engine connected via a long drive shaft to another propeller at the very tail of the plane, pushing it from behind. The concept was pure genius. By mounting the engines on the center line, Dornier's engineers eliminated the enormous aerodynamic drag created by two engines hanging out on the wings. This gave them the power of a twin-engine fighter, but with the sleek, low-drag profile of a single-engine plane. The result was a fighter with a straight-line speed that was almost untouchable. It exceeded practically everything else in the sky, and it combined this speed with heavy armament and armor that would have made it a truly formidable opponent in combat. It even had an ejection seat, a feature decades ahead of its time. But in what is becoming a familiar story for late-war German designs, the Do 335 arrived far too late and in far too few numbers. Crippling development delays meant the first prototype didn't even fly until October 1943. Production aircraft only began trickling into test units in the first few months of 1945. It's believed that only 37 were ever fully completed before the factories were overrun. None of them ever saw genuine air-to-air combat, though several were flown in high-speed trials that confirmed their jaw-dropping performance. The fail represented German engineering at its most innovative and, ultimately, its most desperate. It was a complex masterpiece that arrived on the scene just as the curtains were falling. Allied test pilots who flew captured examples after the war were unanimous in their praise, calling its speed and handling phenomenal and hailing it as one of the finest piston engine fighters ever conceived. Had it arrived 2 years earlier, the air war over Europe could have looked very different. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. The top of the mountain, the fastest propeller-driven fighter of the Second World War. Coming in at number 1 with a blistering, staggering top speed of 487 miles per hour is the ultimate American thoroughbred, the North American P-51H Mustang. This aircraft represented the absolute peak of American piston engine fighter design, the final and most perfect evolution of the legendary Mustang. And let's be clear, the P-51H wasn't just a P-51D with a bigger engine. This was a comprehensive, ground-up redesign. The engineers at North American went back to the drawing board with one goal: squeeze every last ounce of performance out of the Mustang airframe. They put the plane on a radical diet, stripping nearly 1,500 pounds of weight from the airframe through the use of lighter construction techniques, a completely redesigned and slimmed-down fuselage, and the removal of all non-essential equipment. That's like kicking 2 large passengers out of your car right before a race. Then they installed the most powerful version of the Packard V1650 engine, the American-built version of the Rolls-Royce Merlin. This new 9 model came equipped with water injection, allowing it to produce incredible bursts of emergency power. The result was a fighter that could flirt with 500 miles per hour in level flight, a speed that was deep into jet territory at the time. But its speed was only half the story. The dramatic weight reduction completely transformed the Mustang's handling characteristics. The P-51H rolled faster, climbed quicker, and could maneuver more nimbly than any previous Mustang variant. Test pilots who flew it raved about it, calling it the finest handling Mustang ever built. Crucially, it achieved all this without sacrificing the P-51's most famous asset, range. It could still fly over 850 miles on its internal fuel tanks, meaning it had the legs to escort bombers all the way to Tokyo and back, while being able to outrun and outfight virtually any Japanese defender it might encounter. Production of this Super Mustang began in February 1945, and 555 had been delivered by August when Japan surrendered. They arrived too late for combat in Europe, and while a few squadrons reached the Pacific theater, none engaged in air-to-air combat before the war came to a sudden end. But the P-51H stands as a monument to what was possible at the absolute bleeding edge of propeller fighter design. It was faster, lighter, and more capable than anything else with a piston engine. In a war that drove aviation technology forward at a breathtaking pace, the P-51H stood alone at the summit. These 8 aircraft represent the absolute pinnacle of propeller-driven aviation. Each one was forged in the crucible of humanity's most desperate conflict, a time when nations poured limitless resources into gaining even the slightest advantage in the sky. What's truly remarkable when you look at this list is how close these top speeds really are. Just 61 miles per hour separates the FW-190 at number 8 from the P-51H at number 1. Every single one of those miles per hour was bought with countless hours of testing, brilliant engineering, and desperate innovation under the unimaginable pressure of total war. Each aircraft on this list was a masterpiece that could mean the difference between life and death for the young men who flew them. Of course, speed wasn't everything. Maneuverability, firepower, range, reliability, and above all, pilot skill all mattered enormously in the complex ballet of aerial combat. But in a war where a few seconds could determine survival, where catching an enemy bomber just before it reached its target could save thousands of lives, and where being able to escape superior numbers meant you lived to fight another day, speed was the ultimate advantage. So now you know the 8 fastest propeller fighters of World War II ranked by the hard numbers. But I know this list is going to be controversial. Do you disagree? Do you think another aircraft deserves a spot on this list? Let me know in the comments which fighter you believe was truly the fastest and why.